this video, we're going to talk about designing a function. It's all well and good to understand the syntax and the features of a function, but it's another thing to know when you actually need one. What I recommend is starting with the problem. Think about what you're trying to accomplish. What are you trying to solve? What are you trying to do? Then break that down into steps. And that's something, I mean, honestly, that's something you learn through experience in programming. We're going to work through a problem between this video and the next video to show how that can get broken down into discrete functions that then will become part of a program. What you want to do is see if there are repeated steps. A repeated step should probably be kicked out into a function. And then see if there are discrete tasks, a specific calculation or a value assignment, even something small. So for example, if you've got a list of names, lots of first and last names, but what you really need is a field that's last comma first. So you should be able to easily take each of those first and last names, send those in as parameters and spit back out, return out the value that's last comma first. So something even just as small as that, a little task that you're doing would be a good candidate for a function. Really, it all comes from understanding what is my ultimate goal and then trying to think about how I can break that down into steps. Now, once you've identified where you need a function, then you can think about specific inputs or parameters and outputs, returns or results. Some of the questions you can ask to help figure this out. Does your function need information from the call source? So with our little example of the first name, last name, that function that would perform that concatenation would need two parameters, right? Two string values that then are going to be concatenated and returned back. So those would be parameters. What form will your input be? And the example I just gave, we know that they would be strings. And so we would make sure to use appropriate string handling features in our expressions. What output will your function perform? So you want to think about, is it going to just do a thing? Or is it going to actually return a value? And then how will you make that output useful? Are you going to display it to the user? If so, how are you going to do that? Are you going to return it as a value? And if so, then what do you need to do with that value? So once you've figured out the function that you need, then you can get into these detailed questions about the features of that precise function. But it's really important to go through that first step of conceptualizing the overall problem and breaking that down into steps as best you can. And again, in that planning stage, you may have an idea of your steps and you may have to revise that as you go and as you see the actual things that you need to do. So let's think through a scenario because I think it's really hard, even talking that through, it's really hard to conceptualize unless you have an actual application that you can start applying these ideas to. Let's say you want to code a card game where users flip a card and then the computer flips a card. The two values are compared, the highest card wins. So what are some of the distinct tasks you'd have to perform? Well, you definitely have to create some CSS code to format red cards, black cards, back of the deck. You'd have to create HTML and CSS. You can use CSS to format it, a button to activate the flipping of the cards. So that would be something. And again, we know how to do those things, right? We know we could do these things. You'd need to create a randomizer that would select numbers from 2 through ace or 2 through 14. You'd also want to keep track of selections for each suit to make sure that duplicate values are eliminated. So for example, what I mean by that is there's only one king of spades. So when that card is played, you would not want the king of spades to come up again within that deck, right? So if we assume a one deck scenario where half the deck is with the computer, half the deck is with the user, and then each card is played, we'd want to make sure that only those 52 cards are played, that you're not having duplicates coming up. So that's a thing we'd have to think about. That would come in with the idea of validation. You need to create a way to flip the cards for the computer after the user has flipped their card. And you want to make sure you can evaluate the two cards to determine which is higher. And you want to signal the winner somehow, right? So you want to have that comparison and you want to signal who is the winner. And then, of course, you want to keep track of the score for the computer and the score from the user. If we're going to consider a one deck scenario, we would want to keep track of when all the cards have been played and the game is over. And then we would have a score for the computer, score for the user, and we should be able to obviously compare those two values and say who the winner is. Okay, So that sounds like an awful lot, right? I'm sure as you're looking at that and thinking it through, you may even be thinking of some other tasks you have to perform. This is just kind of an outline of the main things, and that seems like an awful lot. But if we break it down into little steps and just think about, what is the step that we can do right now with just the knowledge that we have so far, and we'll start with that, and then we can work our way through to the other steps. I honestly can tell you that a lot of times I have learned programming stuff because I have a specific need, a certain functionality that I have to do, and so I go research and figure out what's the coding that I need to do to accomplish that task. And that truly is probably the best way to learn programming is, you need to do a thing, and so you figure out how to do it. What do we know so far? We know how to do the CSS and the HTML. We can do a little bit of formatting. That's easy enough. But then let's focus on this one. Create a randomizer that will select numbers 2 through 14. At the very least, let's create that randomizer and then display our values on the page in some way. So that's what we're going to focus on in the next video. I'll actually work through creating the code that's going to be part of this scenario. Hopefully this helps you get a handle on designing a function a little bit. Remember, you want to think through your problem, break it down into steps, and then identify some place you can start, right? What's a core element that you need to be able to do, start coding there. And then as you begin to code, you start to see the other pieces that you need.